St. Paul today speaks about freedom, which really means, in the Catholic understanding, freedom to do what we're supposed to do. During the coming week, we have, of course, the celebration of the Declaration of Independence, with the emphasis on freedom. America has always been known as a free country, and there are many freedoms that we have that are not found in all other parts of the world. Freedoms are precious things. In the history of our country, we look at the notion of religious freedom. One can only surmise or conclude that the history of religious freedom in our country is checkered. Many of you, I'm sure, have been to Washington, perhaps have gone in to see the Washington Monument. When the Washington Monument was built, many nations donated each of them a stone to be put into this new structure representing a free country. One of the nations that donated a stone was the Vatican City State. The stone donated by the Vatican is not in the monument. Why isn't it in the monument? Because a group of anti-Catholics took the stone and threw it in the Potomac River. The message was clear. Catholics are not welcome here. We hear the gospel today talk about welcoming or not being welcomed. Now, admittedly, Catholics, really by the grace of God, were able to live in this land, though they weren't always appreciated, due to certain prejudices that are not completely dead. It got to the point that when a Catholic was running for the presidency, beginning in the 1930s with Al Smith, the rumor going around was that if a Catholic is elected to be president, the Pope will run the country. That would have been news to the Pope. Let me tell you, the Pope has more work than anyone, really. It's not his job description to run other countries. He has no intention or desire to do that. He's a spiritual leader. But the establishment in the United States wanted to take no chances. Now, in 1960, many of us in the church today were alive in 1960. It's not ancient history. There was a Supreme Court case, the plaintiff of which allegedly was a child named William Murray. Now, I've met Mr. Murray. Mr. Murray is a fine man. The problem was his mother. His mother, who was Madalyn Murray O'Hara, used her son to be the plaintiff in the case in 1960 that resulted in the elimination of Bible reading and the Lord's Prayer in the government school system throughout our country. The Supreme Court, if you look at church-state cases, and you can find them, look at the Catholic Almanac or another resource online, church-state cases throughout the past 50 years have not been good. The court has gone out of its way, which really means the government, to marginalize not just Catholicism, but any vestige of or influence of religion. So when there's some sort of a tragedy that happens in our country, and we've had many of them, government spokesmen will call for a moment of silence. Why? Because they can't use that terrible word, P-R-A-Y-E-R. Because that's religion. And the elites who run the government don't want people to be wrapped up in religion, as if religion is some sort of a detriment to the nation's health. It was very interesting that George Washington, who was not a Catholic, not necessarily even a practicing Protestant type, but even he understood, and he said this in his farewell address, that political prosperity cannot be had unless the people are moral. Then he said, let us be careful to indulge the supposition that morality can be sustained without religion. Now, George Washington wasn't pushing religion on people. He was simply stating a fact. No religion, no morality. In other words, it's in the state's best interest to respect people's rights to religious freedom. Now, this past week, it's been a dark time in the recent history of our land. The Supreme Court refused to defend the definition of marriage as being an exclusive union of one man and one woman. It didn't uphold the so-called Defense of Marriage Act, and they refused to uphold Proposition 8 from California. Now, someone might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with anything? It has much to do with things that have yet to come, which are already happening, I might add. The litigation, we can imagine it will also happen in Ohio. Litigation to challenge all of the states that do defend marriage and define it properly as a union between a husband and a wife. And the litigation may go up to the Supreme Court. I wouldn't trust the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, unfortunately, with the exception of about 4 justices, does not know what is truthful, what is good, what is proper, what is decent, what is admirable, what is honest. And I say this with all humility. 2 of the men on the Supreme Court who were responsible for the latest debacle of Catholics. In fact, they made the difference. I appeal to all young people here who have yet to embark upon your life's career. Don't leave your faith behind. Faith is something that we must take with us throughout all of the years that God gives us. We need people in government who have courage to stand for the truth. I'm waiting for a governor, a Catholic governor or executive, or even legislator, to step down rather than to have anything to do with legislation that violates the sanctity of human life or human marriage. I haven't yet encountered anything of that type. I remember the King of Belgium some years ago temporarily abdicated because he wanted nothing to do with signing off on a bill that liberalized abortion. Well, the man was a good Catholic man. He wanted nothing to do with evil. You can't support evil things. In the states that have embraced this aberration that you can have a marriage between 2 men or 2 women, what's next? Already in Massachusetts, Catholic adoption agencies have had to close their doors. The Catholic Church is involved in many areas of life. We have many institutions, not just parishes. And the reason that the Catholic adoption agencies have had to close is because the Catholic Church does not believe that putting children up for adoption in an atmosphere where you have 2 men or 2 women living a so-called alternative lifestyle is going to be good for the children. The state doesn't care. We're really under the tyranny of bureaucracy, which is very sad. Furthermore, this kind of thing could be in store for Ohio should such litigation continue on. Furthermore, priests and ministers will not be exempt. They will be persecuted by the government. I guarantee it. Things continue to go the way they are. Persecuted for not solemnizing the so-called same-sex marriages. They're not marriages. Any definition to that effect by any human authority is completely bogus. When we're dealing with people, we have to be charitable, of course. We cannot allow ourselves to become brainwashed by the media. The media is cheerleading for what can only be a state, a society, a civilization that has no real hope for the family, no hope for the future. Nothing but chaos. We have in our country pockets of this chaos in most large cities. The reason for the chaos, and you won't hear about this from bureaucrats, is because the families are all messed up. We really have to pray for the restoration of the family in our country. Family based on the union of husband and wife. There's no future for our civilization or our country unless we have solid family life. St. Paul urges us in another place to pray for all people in authority. Think about this. Jesus was put to death at the hands of a government bureaucrat who realized that Jesus was innocent. He went against his conscience. It's a great sin. We need honest people at all levels of society. Honest people who are willing to stand for the truth even when it's not popular. And don't fall for the idea that defining marriage as an exclusive union between a man and a woman is somehow not popular. I can tell you in France, the president of France tried to impose the new definition of marriage. 1 million people from all walks of life, and it's not an exaggeration, 1 million people marched against that. The elites who run the governments of the West don't care what the people think, even though they talk about democracy. They don't believe in it. If people don't agree with them, they don't believe in it. The court system, the way it's used in our country very often, is to thwart the will of the people. So please pray for this country. Please pray for a return to sanity. Please pray for religious freedom. The greatest threat to religious freedom in our nation is people not practicing their religion. It's not a benign thing that most Catholics don't even come to church. Please pray. Fast. The bishops are recommending fasting from meat on Friday. Make holy hours. Pray the rosary. We could change the world if enough people prayed the rosary every day. We can do it. And be active. Lay people, Catholic lay people, have as one of their venues for living the faith that of the political forum. We must be good, solid citizens, not simply people who go along with the latest dictum that comes from the government or the Supreme Court. And I say this not because I'm against the court or the government. That simply isn't the point. But we have to recognize that God must be given his due first. What he has made, what he stands for. Or we have no hope.